At dawn, the emergency room at Ansong Hospital, which I inherited from my father, was, as always, filled with silence. The sound of an ambulance siren pierced the night's silence, and soon a man and a woman were rushed into the room. Extremely agitated, their hearts were beating irregularly, and their blood pressure was skyrocketing. The nurse reported urgently, "Director, 2 of your patients are in drug shock. They appear to have overdosed on stimulants." I rushed to the scene of chaos. But the moment I saw the 2 people writhing in pain on the emergency bed, my entire body froze. The man was my husband, Lee Jin-woo, the exemplary husband I'd always been proud of. The woman was Park Ha-yoon, my sister-in-law, whom I cherished like a younger sister. I didn't say anything or shout. I simply turned to the nurse with a cold, mocking laugh. Then I calmly gave her instructions. "Both of you need to undergo a thorough medical examination immediately." Channel Introduction. Welcome back to the Leisurely Old Age channel. I'm Kim Seo-hyun. There is probably no greater irony in this world than having to personally administer first aid to my husband and sister-in-law, who were brought in after enjoying a pleasant time together. On that fateful night, I fulfilled my responsibility as a doctor. But as a wife, I instinctively knew that my marriage and my trust were over. And the toxicology test results I ordered weren't just a medical procedure. They were the death knell for my marriage, the first shot signaling the start of a war one must win. To understand how I could remain so calm, I need to tell you the story of my marriage. Lee Jin-woo and I had been married for 5 years. My father passed away early, leaving me the entire Ansong Hospital. I had to shoulder the heavy burden of both my medical practice and the hospital's management. That's when Jin-woo appeared. At the time, he was a capable sales manager at a pharmaceutical company. He was handsome, eloquent, and, above all, he touched my heart with a delicate touch. He shared all my difficulties and encouraged me. He told me he wasn't interested in my wealth, but only in me. I believed him. After we got married, he quit his job to help run the hospital. He proved to be an exemplary husband. He respected my expertise and always supported my decisions. He said, "You focus solely on saving lives, and I'll take care of the difficult tasks like management and competitions." I considered it the greatest fortune of my life to have such a capable and understanding husband. My in-laws were also wonderful. My mother-in-law was gentle, and my husband had only 2 brothers. My husband's younger brother, Lee Jin-ho, was a somewhat introverted and ordinary young man who worked on our hospital's facilities team. He married Park Ha-yoon a year after us. My sister-in-law, Ha-yoon, was always young and beautiful, as cheerful as a lark. From the day we first got married, she followed me and adored me. "My sister-in-law is beautiful and capable, and she's my role model," she always said that. I truly considered her like my own sister, and I appointed her to one of the most important positions in the hospital, the head of the materials management team. I believed I had a perfectly happy family and a strong supporter. Little did I know that the 2 people I trusted and loved most were stabbing me in the back. That night I was on duty. Around 2 a.m., the emergency room erupted in commotion. The head nurse rushed in to report that 2 critically ill patients had been brought in. The guardians said they'd been at a party and consumed some unknown alcohol, and now both were in critical condition. I rushed out with the medical team. 2 beds were brought in almost simultaneously. The man's face flushed, his heart pounded abnormally, his blood pressure rose, and he even showed mild signs of aging. The woman panicked, vomited, and screamed. But the moment I looked closely at their faces, I froze. Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon, together at 2 a.m. in this state. They didn't smell of any alcohol. Only the scent of wine and a strong perfume mingled with each other. Their clothes were disheveled, and even on the husband's shirt collar, I could see a bright red lipstick mark. That lipstick, that color, was the limited edition lipstick I had given Ha-yoon last week. In that moment, all the suspicious pieces of the past came together. The nights my husband came home late, claiming to be entertaining clients. Ha-Yun went out shopping with friends. The glances I had secretly exchanged at family dinners between the two people I had casually passed by. Everything became crystal clear. My mind was spinning. I was a doctor, a betrayed wife, and a sister-in-law. Pain, anger, and disgust all came rushing back at me, almost knocking me down. But no, I'm Dr. Kim Seo-hyun, the director of this hospital. I couldn't let myself crumble before those who had trampled my love and trust. I took a deep breath and suppressed all my boiling emotions. And then I returned to my expression, terrifyingly cold and professional. I looked down at the two betrayers lying on the bed, paying the price for their own sordid pleasure. And I let out a sneer, with a meaning only I knew. I turned to the head nurse, who recognized them, and looked at me with concerned eyes. And without the slightest tremor, I remained calm and composed. I gave a clear command. Perform emergency treatment according to the drug shock protocol. But before that, I need to take blood from both of them and conduct a thorough toxicology test. It's medical. As soon as possible. Report the results directly to me within an hour. After speaking, I turned and headed straight for my director's office. I left the medical team's bewilderment behind, and the two traitors lying there, unaware that the rein that would determine their fate was being pulled. Little did they know that the blood test results would prove their sordid relationship and be the first bullet that would lead them to their own destruction. My gaze turned to the camera, a determined and resolute expression. What terrible truth would the blood test results reveal? And what kind of counterattack would I, as the betrayed wife, launch with this clear evidence? If you'd like to join me in lifting the veil of this disgusting secret, don't forget to subscribe to the Leisurely Know Who channel and turn on notifications to be the first to see the next part of the story. As soon as I entered the director's office, I slammed the door shut. It was to isolate myself from the chaos and disgust unfolding outside. This space, where I had spent countless tense nights making life or death decisions to save lives, was now shattered. It had become my only refuge. I collapsed into the cold leather chair, my whole body trembling. The mask of strength I had pretended to have worn down fell away, and the cynicism I had previously felt vanished. Only an empty void washed over me. I had pretended to be strong, to be an expert, but ultimately I was just a woman, a wife. The stark truth I had just faced was more painful than 1,000 blades. Our wedding photo was on the computer screen. The two of us, smiling brightly. It had been my computer wallpaper for the past 5 years. Whenever I felt weary, I looked at this photo and gained strength. But now, Jingwoo's smile in the photo seemed eerily fake and unfamiliar. The hour I waited for the test results, the bittersweet encounter now a lie, was a time to confront sweet memories. 5 years ago, I was going through the darkest tunnel of my life. It was right after my father passed away. My young daughter, now a guard doctor, was left with a huge private hospital. The weight of it was overwhelming. I was lost, feeling helpless, and even considered selling this hospital, the very foundation of my father's life's work. Just then, Jinwoo appeared. He was a sales manager for a large pharmaceutical company who frequently visited the hospital. He stood by my side not as a business partner but as a friend. He listened to my story and offered management advice. He showed me the way and gave me the strength to keep going. He said he loved my strength and talent. He said he wasn't interested in my background. I trusted the man with that warm smile and sincere eyes. A year later, when the hospital's affairs stabilized, we got married. On our wedding day, he said something that touched me. Seo-yeon, I've thought about it deeply, and I don't think I can continue my work any longer. I can't leave you in charge of this large hospital alone. From now on, I'll quit my job and dedicate myself solely to helping you run the hospital. My career isn't more important than yours. What woman wouldn't be moved by such a tremendous sacrifice? He gave up his own promising future to become my unwavering support. I considered myself incredibly lucky to have found a man who loved me more than I loved myself. Without hesitation, I appointed him as vice president, giving him full authority over management, finances, and competition affairs. I wanted to focus solely on my specialty, medical care, wearing a white coat, and saving lives. Our marriage was a dream. He was the perfect husband. He never forgot our anniversaries and always prepared surprises. He supported my every decision, telling me, "Just do what you're passionate about, and I'll block out everything else." And then Park Hae-yoon appeared. She was the girlfriend of my husband's younger brother, Jin-ho. When Jin-ho first introduced Hae-yoon, I immediately felt attracted to her. She was young, pretty, and spoke kindly, and especially looked at me with eyes full of respect. I truly respected my sister-in-law. She was talented, pretty, and my idol. Having no younger sister, I immediately considered Hae-yoon like my own. I cherished her and took care of everything. When Jin-ho and Hae-yoon got married, I appointed her to the hospital supplies management team without hesitation. I thought my family would feel more secure if I took on such an important role. I trusted her completely. I gave her opportunities and taught her everything. We went shopping together and to the spa. We were incredibly close and shared all our secrets. I never imagined that the sister I trusted and cherished so much would be having an affair with my husband, right in my own home. This betrayal came not from one person, but from the two people I trusted most in the world. The pain was doubled. Sweet memories came rushing back like waves. But now, instead of warmth, those memories left only cold ridicule and bitterness. Every whisper of love from Jin-woo, every look of respect from Hae-yoon now felt like part of a carefully orchestrated play. They had deceived me. They had been acting in front of me for years. Then a knock interrupted my memory. The head nurse came in carrying a sealed file. "Director, the toxicology test results are back." My heart pounded. It had come. Black letters on white paper. The truth I had been waiting for, yet feared to face. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure as the director. "Yes, leave it there." The nurse placed the file on the desk and quietly left. I stared at the white envelope. It felt like 1,000 pounds. The moment I opened it, I knew there was no going back. My marriage, my family, everything was officially over. My hands trembled as I held the envelope. I am a doctor. Every day I faced dozens, hundreds of test results. Numbers, biochemical results, diagnostic imaging, none of it bothered me. But this test result was different. This wasn't just a medical result. This was evidence of betrayal, a verdict on my marriage. I took a deep breath and decisively cut open the envelope on my desk with a paper knife. My wife had a sheet of paper from Company A filled with technical terms. I quickly scanned the general parameters, including heart, liver, and kidney function. Except for a few indicators of sympathetic nervous system overexcitation, everything was normal. And finally, I reached the most important part. The toxicology screening and quantitative analysis results. I started with Lee Jin-hoo's results. The moment I read the first line, my heart felt like it had been hit with a giant hammer. It was sildenafil, the active ingredient in the antihypertensive drug known as Viagra. The concentration was 1200 ngm LVPH. This was an extremely high level, several times the therapeutic dose. It meant he had taken a massive dose. This amount could have caused serious cardiovascular side effects, such as rapid heart rate, high blood pressure, and even myocardial infarction. I quickly turned my attention to Park Hae-yoon's results. The results were similar. Sildenafil 800 milliliters. The concentration was lower, but still very high, especially for a woman. Now it was clear. It was no longer speculation. Black letters on white paper. They were really together. They used stimulants together. It was the ugly, repulsive, undeniable truth. A wave of shame and pain swirled within me. My husband, whom I was proud of, my sister-in-law, whom I loved. They had committed this degrading act together. But that wasn't the most horrifying fact. When I read the next line of results, I felt my blood run cold. Below sildenafil was the name of another ingredient. A name that, in my experience as a doctor, scares me. Zopid, Zopid, Yangsang, Zopid. It was a strictly regulated sleeping pill, a psychotropic drug. While it had a quick sleep-inducing effect, the side effects were very dangerous. If taken incorrectly, it could cause hallucinations, actual incoordination, loss of control, and especially short-term memory loss. Users might not remember anything they did while the drug was taking effect after waking up. Why? Why was this substance even in their blood? A stimulant and a sleeping pill, two drugs with almost opposite effects. Using them simultaneously was extremely dangerous, as it could lead to unpredictable drug interactions. A prank from friends. Nothing could be more vicious and crazy. My rationality as a doctor began to suppress my pain as a wife. I began to analyze. What use could drowsiness be used for in a secret encounter? To enhance pleasure, no, its effect is sedation. Drugging one of them didn't make sense either. They both tested positive. Could a third party have drugged both of them? But then, a colder and more terrifying hypothesis flashed through my mind. If the drugs weren't just for their pleasure, if they were prepared for some other purpose, if they were prepared for me, Jinwoo's words suddenly came to mind. He always suggested I take some nutritional supplements or tranquilizers to help me sleep, saying I was overworked. I also remembered the orange juice Haeyoon often made me after work, saying I needed to replenish my vitamins. Could it be that they had been secretly putting drugs in my food and drinks for so long? For what purpose? To weaken my nerves, to make me lose my memory, to drive me insane. A horrific conspiracy, far beyond a simple affair, was slowly unfolding. This wasn't just an emotional betrayal. This could have been a meticulously planned and brutally orchestrated crime. I looked at the test results in my hand again. This was no longer the death knell for my marriage. This was an indictment, undeniable legal evidence. Black letters on white paper. This wasn't just proof of one ugly night. This was the first clue, the key to unlocking a much larger conspiracy, a massive case. The pain in my chest disappeared, and the tears vanished. Instead, a cold composure and steely determination took their place. I was no longer a suffering wife. I am Dr. Kim Seo-hyun. I am the director of Ansang Hospital. And I will not allow anyone to harm me or ruin my father's lifelong efforts. I got up and went to the mirror. I straightened my face, tied my hair neatly, put on a white coat, and put a stethoscope around my neck. I was back to being a doctor, someone who had been stripped of his power over life and death. But this time, the surgery I was about to perform wouldn't take place in an operating room. It would take place right outside, and the patients were two traitors waiting for me. With the test results in hand, my sharpest weapon, I opened the door and calmly walked out. I knew that a clumsy play awaited me outside. And before I became a judge, I would be a very attentive spectator. Putting on the white coat felt like putting on armor. It wasn't just a uniform. It was a symbol of reason and professionalism, a self that must never be broken. I left the director's office and walked with a cool, calm expression toward the two recovery rooms that separated them. When I arrived, Lee Jin-ho and Park Hye-yu had just regained consciousness after receiving IV fluids and an antidote. The drugs still had their effects, and they looked tired and dazed, but when they saw me, a look of bewilderment flashed across their eyes. I said nothing. I simply stood there, arms folded, staring at them with a gaze sharper than a water dragon's dagger. My silence must have been more frightening than my initial rebuke. They looked at me, then at each other, their eyes bewildered, like thieves caught in the act. Just then, my mother-in-law and Jin-woo's younger brother, Jin-ho, came running in. It seemed the nurse had called. "Oh my Jin-woo, Hye-yoon, are you okay?" The mother-in-law rushed over, her voice filled with worry and surprise. Jin-woo ran to his wife's side, his kind face pale with fear. "It's okay, Hye-yoon. How did this happen?" The arrival of reinforcements seemed to give the two criminals courage. Jin-woo quickly shifted from his initial embarrassment and began to play the victim, the husband. He grimaced in pain and looked at me with a voice that seemed to say, "Seo, Seoyeon, I'm sorry. I don't know how I ended up like this either." Park Hae-yoon didn't give in either. She began to sob in Jin-ho's arms, her shoulders trembling slightly. "Sister-in-law, Jin-ho, I was so scared. I don't know anything. The play has begun. It was probably a prearranged play. What on earth happened?" The mother-in-law turned to her son and asked with false sternness. "I don't know either, mother." Jin-woo began to speak in a pitiful voice. "Last night, Hae-yoon and I met some old friends to talk business. They suggested we go to a karaoke room, and we got caught up in the atmosphere and offered each other a shot of liquor. They said it was good for your health. Hae-yoon and I couldn't refuse, so we had a drink. Oh my goodness, after drinking it, my head spun and my whole body felt hot. I don't remember anything after that. When I opened my eyes, I was here, I'm sure it was. It was definitely the liquor. Those bad friends must have put something in our drinks to play a prank on us. It was a perfectly contrived story. A prank by bad friends. There couldn't have been a more perfect excuse to explain why the two of us were together and why we ended up in the hospital in this condition. It was a way to pass the blame on to an invisible third party, making ourselves look like the pitiful victims. My mother-in-law immediately took my side after hearing the story, but this time she didn't stand up for me. She approached Jack, took his hand and spoke softly as if she understood everything. "Seoyeon, did you hear that?" "I knew it. Who did they get hurt by? What could have happened?" "I know you're a thoughtful child, but we shouldn't let a misunderstanding cause a rift in our family. You know how much Jin-woo loves you, and you know how much Hae-yoon follows you, don't you? Thank goodness your life isn't in danger. What happened already?" She paused, squeezed my hand gently, and said with a pleading look, "We're family. Whatever happens, we should handle it quietly at home. What will happen to our reputation if this gets out? How will people view our hospital, our family? In the end, it's just a slap in the face. I'm your sister-in-law and a director, so please forgive your siblings just this once. For the sake of our mother, for the sake of our family, yes." She didn't reprimand or insult me. She used the name of our family and the hospital's reputation to pressure me into silence. It was a much more sophisticated form of psychological warfare. My kind and gentle brother-in-law Jin-ho looked at me with pleading eyes after seeing my wife arrive and hearing my mother and brother speak. "Sister-in-law, please forgive my wife just this once. Hae-yoon is foolish and trusts people easily. Please help our family just this once." The whole family was conspiring to cover up a heinous crime. They acted, cried, and pleaded, trying to turn the ugly affair into a tragic accident. They tried to turn me from a betrayed wife into someone responsible for cleaning up the mess they had created. I listened to it all. All I could see was a lie. In the past, I might have been weak-hearted and believed those crocodile tears. I might have been fooled by the two words, family, but I'm different today. Their clumsy theatrics were nothing more than a ridiculous farce to me. Without saying a word, I took 2 copies of the toxicology test results I had prepared from my white coat pocket. I handed one to my mother-in-law and the other to Jin-ho. "A prank by bad friends, who played a trick on you." My voice was calm and cold, but loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Now take a look. Mother and Mr. Jin know too. Tell me what kind of prank those bad friends played on your son and wife." My mother-in-law and Mr. Jin-no accepted the papers with trembling hands. They weren't doctors, so they couldn't understand all the technical terms. But the 2 words sildenafil and zolpidem and the sky-high concentration readings said it all. Their faces turned pale. I stared straight at Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon, who were lying on the bed, their faces terrified. "Do you two need me to explain what sildenafil is? Or is it a drug you're already too familiar with?" "And zolpidem is a psychoactive sleeping pill prohibited for indiscriminate use. It's a truly elaborate prank using both a stimulant and a sleeping pill simultaneously. Explain. What was your purpose? Was it simply to have fun together, Or was there perhaps another purpose? My question struck the silence like a hammer. The room was filled with a deafening silence. Lee Jianwoo and Park Hayu were speechless, unable to offer a single word of explanation. Their clumsy play had been brutally exposed with a single piece of paper. My mother-in-law was momentarily lost, then hurriedly snatched the test paper and tore it to shreds. How dare you embarrass your husband and sister-in-law here? Are you really the daughter-in-law? She shouted, trying to cover up her embarrassment and shame with anger. Mother, you don't need to tear it up, I scoffed. The originals are safely stored in the lab, along with the 2 blood samples. This is legal evidence. Do you understand? It's undeniable evidence. Only then did they seem to realize I was no longer a docile, easygoing daughter-in-law. I left them no escape. The play had ended, and what awaited them was no longer the family's grief, but the judgment of their conscience, and perhaps even the judgment of the law. After leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. I couldn't breathe the same air as those hypocrites. I drove through the empty streets. The test results in my hand burned my heart like a hot puddle. The truth was out, but the pain and disgust remained. An affair was unforgivable, but to have one with a sister-in-law I cared for and helped was a double betrayal. It was an act that trampled not only on love, but also on the bond between family. And why did those psychotropic medications appear? The theory that they were trying to harm me swirled around in my head, making me anxious. I felt like I was only seeing the tip of a gigantic iceberg. What I had discovered was just the surface, and there might be a much darker and more terrifying truth hidden beneath. I couldn't handle this alone. I needed someone I could trust, someone who could help me with rational, sharp analysis. The only person who came to mind was Jisoo. Jisoo had been my best friend since college. She was my friend, my sister, and my advisor in everything I did. She was now a renowned attorney specializing in civil and criminal cases. I knew that her cool head was the only thing that could save me from this mess. I met her at Jisoo's law office. Seeing my sullen appearance and puffy eyes, she couldn't hide her concern. Seoyeon, what the heck is that tail? What happened? Did you overwork yourself again? I silently placed 2 copies of the test results on the desk. Jisoo picked them up and scanned them. Her brow furrowed, and her expression shifted from surprise to astonishment to shock. She looked up and stared at me in disbelief. Jinwoo and Haeyoon, that's unbelievable. I nodded, and the tears I'd been holding back burst out again. I told her everything. From the fateful encounter in the emergency room to my in-laws' clumsy antics, Jisoo listened quietly, her expression growing increasingly serious. When I finished, she didn't rush to comfort me. She stared intently at the 2 names written on the paper, Sildenafil and Jopidem. Seoyeon, come to your senses and listen carefully. Her voice was very serious. This doesn't seem to be a simple affair. We need to dig deeper. Do you know anything about those 2's past before they became my husband and sister-in-law? Jisoo's words felt like a key opening a drawer of memories I was carrying. I began to search my memory. Jisoo, they're from the same hometown. They grew up together in a small rural village in Chungcheong province. Heard that, Jisoo's eyes lit up. That could be the clue. Just wait a moment. She picked up the receiver and dialed someone. I vaguely heard her speaking in a professional tone. Yes, Director Kim, it's Jisoo. I have a favor to ask. Please check the information on these 2. Yes, my name is XCY Cat. That's right. I want to know everything about their past. In particular, what their relationship was like before. Yes, the sooner the better. Thank you. After hanging up, Jisoo looked back at me with cold, confident eyes. That's enough. Director Kim is a very capable private investigator who works with our office frequently. We'll have our answers by tomorrow morning at the latest. Now you rest well here. Don't think about anything. But how could I not think about anything? That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I pieced together everything that had happened like a puzzle. Haeyoon's gaze as she looked at Jinno, Her and Jinho's hasty marriage, their overly affectionate demeanor, everything pointed in the same direction. And the next morning, while I was in a daze, Jisoo came in holding an envelope. Her expression was grave. "Seo Yoon, the results are in. And it's much worse than we imagined." She showed me the detailed report from the detective agency. My wife was filled with testimonies from Jinwoo and Ha-yoon's hometown residents. Neighbors, old schoolmates, they all testified to one thing: Lee Jinwoo and Park Hae-yoon. They weren't just hometown friends, they were each other's first loves. They had attended Jungmago High School together since childhood and had promised their future together by the stream in the countryside. Their love was beautiful, and they vowed to move to Seoul together, settle down, and then return to their hometown to get married and start a family. But then I appeared. I, the only daughter of Kim Seo-hyun, the director of a large private hospital, appeared as an opportunity in Lee Jin-woo's life, like a lottery ticket that could change his life forever. And Lee Jin-woo, a country boy burning with ambition, chose the fastest path to success without a moment's hesitation. He abandoned the woman to whom he had devoted his youth, chasing a wealthier and more glamorous future. Park Ha-yoo was deeply hurt, and it is said he suffered for a long time. Everyone in her hometown pitied her and called Lee Jin-woo a traitor. But just a few months later, something unexpected happened. Hae-yoon suddenly announced her marriage. And the person she was marrying was none other than Lee Jin-woo's younger brother, Lee Jin-ho. Their marriage was very sudden and awkward. No one, including Jin-ho, could have imagined that this marriage was part of a grand plan. Jisoo analyzed it for me. Her voice was cold and cold. "I see, Seo Yoon, everything was perfectly planned, Park Hae-yoon. She's not naive. She might have been really hurt at first. But after that, Lee Jin-woo must have come back. He didn't just comfort her. He must have painted a brighter future for her. A future where she could have love, money, everything." Jisoo continued. "Think about it. What promise did Lee Jin-woo make to her? It must have been something like this. First, marry my younger brother, Jin-ho. Only then can I legally enter that house and be by my side. I'll play the role of a good sister-in-law, gain Kim Seo-hyun's trust, and slowly we'll take everything. Once everything is in our hands, I'll divorce that woman and proudly welcome you back. Then, that hospital will be ours." Jisoo's analysis pierced my heart like a dagger. It was so logical, so plausible. Everything was explained. The sad look in Hae-yoon's eyes when I first visited her in-laws, her and Jin-ho's sudden marriage, the excessive intimacy and false respect she'd shown me over the past few years. She didn't see me as a sister-in-law. She saw me as a rival for her love, an obstacle to overcome, and my good brother-in-law Jin-ho. He was the most pitiful person in this story. He married the woman he loved, but he didn't realize that her heart had never belonged to him. He had lived a life of deception. Betrayed by his own wife and Chin-young, he had no idea that the perfect shield he had used to conceal their illicit relationship was nothing more than a pawn on a chessboard. That's what Operation Slave Jisoo called their plan. The slaves had entered the mulberry field and were quietly gnawing away at everything from within. The incident in the emergency room that night wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was probably part of a plan that went awry. They were overconfident, celebrating their victory too soon, and they paid the price. I sat there. The play they'd orchestrated involved not only betrayal but also meticulous plotting and calculation. They weren't just having an affair. They were partners in crime, conspiring to destroy the world's fraud. And I wasn't the only victim. Jin-ho and the hospital that held everything my father had left me. If this theory was correct, Jisoo's voice grew increasingly serious. Their plot didn't stop at just being together. They were after my property, the hospital my father had left me. "Seoyeon, you have to go back. You have to go back to that hospital. We have to recheck all the ledgers and all the contracts those two signed without anyone knowing. We have to find the clear evidence, black writing on white paper. Only then can we bring them down. My mind raced, but the pain soon turned into unbearable rage. I won't let their plans succeed. I won't see my father's hard work fall into the hands of such unscrupulous people. I will reveal their true colors, not only for myself, but for my poor brother-in-law, Jin-ho. I knew it. I grasped Jisoo's hand tightly. My eyes were filled with determination. I will go back. I will find the evidence. Now my fight had a clear goal. This was no longer the fight of a betrayed wife. This was the fight of a director and owner to protect his property and restore the hospital's reputation. After taking a few days off, using family matters as an excuse, I returned to the hospital with a completely different face. I was no longer Kim Seo-hyun, broken from pain. I returned to the cool, stern, and professional appearance of the director. I knew that Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon would be extremely wary after the incident that night. So, I didn't show any suspicion. When I met them again at the hospital, I played the part perfectly. I pretended to be the forgiving wife who accepted their excuse that it was a friend's prank. Let's just let it go. I told Jin-woo that in front of my mother-in-law and him. I think it served as a good lesson for you and Ha-yoon. I need to be careful with my friendships from now on. I hope this never happens again. My attitude reassured them. They believed I loved my husband so much and wanted to save our family's reputation that I decided to cover it all up. They probably thought I was foolishly falling for another trap. Their inattention was my opportunity. And I began my own financial investigation. It was a very difficult and sensitive undertaking. As Vice President of Management, Lee Jin-woo held virtually all authority over the hospital's finances. All contracts and supporting documents passed through his hands. If I publicly requested an audit of the books, he would immediately become wary and attempt to destroy the evidence. I needed a compelling justification for accessing those documents, and I figured out a way. I called an emergency executive meeting with just 3 people present, myself, Mr. Jin-woo, and the head of the accounting team, who had cared for my father for many years and whom I completely trusted. I began with a serious tone. I've been so focused on clinical operations that I then neglected the overall management of the hospital. Going forward, I want to gain a deeper understanding of the financial situation and business activities so that I can work with Mr. Lee to develop a better strategy. Therefore, starting today, I'd like to review all financial reports and equipment supply contracts for the past 2 years. Mr. Jin-woo seemed a little surprised by my proposal. He looked at me with a searching gaze, but my reasoning was perfectly valid. I was the president and the owner. It was his absolute right to want to understand the financial situation of my business. He had no reason to refuse. Of course, he said with a slightly awkward smile, you can see it whenever you want. I'll immediately order the accounting team to prepare the documents. He agreed, but I knew he wouldn't stay silent. He bought himself time to manipulate the ledgers and erase his tracks. But he didn't know I was one step ahead. Immediately after the meeting, I had a private meeting with the accounting team leader. I didn't tell him the truth about Jin-woo and Ha-yoon. I simply told him that I suspected a large-scale financial misappropriation during the purchase of goods and needed his help in conducting a quiet investigation. The team leader, who was utterly loyal to my father, agreed to help me without hesitation. She promised to provide me with 2 sets of ledgers, the ones fabricated for my report, and the original, unaltered ledgers and supporting documents. And for a few nights after that, the finance director's office became a veritable investigative headquarters. Every night after finishing work at her office, Jisoo would come to me and we would review the mountains of paperwork and ledgers. We had to cross-check every single number, every single contract, every single signature. And what we discovered proved Jisoo's hypothesis completely correct. It was a highly sophisticated and daring scheme to embezzle hospital funds. Countless contracts for medical equipment, supplies, medicines, and supplies were signed with companies I never heard of. The names sounded plausible, like Angam Medical Equipment Co., Ltd. and Sungchang Pharmaceutical Co., Limited. But when Jizu had someone investigate, they were all shell companies with no addresses or registered as shabby houses in remote rural areas. And the prices of these contracts were incredibly inflated. A standard blood pressure monitor, which could be purchased for 200,000 won, was listed on the contract as 1 million won. A box of medical gloves worth tens of thousands of won was sold for hundreds of thousands of won. Of course, the difference disappeared without a trace. And the person who approved all these ghost contracts at the hospital was none other than Park Hae-yoon, head of the materials management team. And the person who ultimately signed the payment documents was Vice President Lee Jin-woo. There couldn't have been a more perfect collusion. We traced the flow of funds. Billions of won were transferred to the accounts of those shell companies, then split into several individual accounts, moved in a complex manner, and finally gathered into a few main accounts. And the owners of those accounts were Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon. They were slowly eating away at the hospital I had trusted and left behind, as my father had left it to me. They had stolen not only my money, but also my trust and my career. My anger surged. "Enough is enough," Seo Yana said amidst the mountains of criminal evidence. This alone would have sent those two to prison, but I saw the fabricated numbers and forged signatures. My heart was torn, but I knew this fight wasn't over. I didn't just want them to face the law. I wanted them to admit their guilt and shed their hypocritical masks. I wanted my poor brother-in-law Jin-ho to know the truth. And I wanted the entire family who had tried to cover up the crime to learn an unforgettable lesson. When I held a mountain of evidence of Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon's embezzlement of hospital funds, I felt like I was holding a cyanide bomb. On the one hand, I wanted to detonate it immediately and expose their true selves before the law. But on the other, my reason and Jisu's advice held me back. If I acted now, they would be arrested and imprisoned. But the story behind it, the full story of the silkworm operation disguised as a sinful first love, may be buried forever. My poor brother-in-law, Jin-ho, will never know the truth, and I might be seen by the world as a wife who cold-heartedly sent her husband and sister-in-law to prison. No, I didn't want that kind of victory. I wanted them to pay the price not only before the law, but also before their conscience. I wanted them to strip away their hypocrisy and confess the entire ugly truth. So a new plan was hatched. It was a plan designed to make the vipers crawl out of their burrows. I didn't directly confront them about the ghost contracts. Instead, I initiated a drastic fiscal austerity policy. I called another executive meeting. This time, under the pretext of streamlining operations and cutting unnecessary costs, I declared that from now on, all contracts and expenditures exceeding 50 million won would require my seal as director. Vice Director Lee Jin-hoo's authority was temporarily suspended pending review. My decision was a dampener on their embezzlement scheme. Jin-woo was shocked and angry, but he was helpless. He had no reason to object to a decision that was in the best interest of the company. He could only grieve and watch as his illicit financial resources were cut off. Next, I asked the accounting team to review and terminate all contracts with problematic suppliers. The ghost companies they had established were removed from the hospital's partner list one by one. Their financial resources were completely cut off. Without money, their lavish lifestyle began to suffer. Credit card bills from luxury shopping sprees, installments for lavish overseas trips were arriving, and most importantly, there was no more money to be smuggled overseas. Their patience quickly ran out. They could no longer play the innocent victim. And the day I had been waiting for arrived. They finally decided to reveal their true colors. That day, after work, Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon came to Director Ji's office together. They no longer came separately. They appeared together, very defiantly. They opened the door wide and came in without knocking. Hae-yoon followed Jin-woo. Their faces no longer bore any guilt or fear. Instead, They were filled with a brazen, reckless attitude. "Let's talk, Miss Kim Seo-hyun." Jin-woo was the first to speak. His voice was cold, no longer the kind you treat a loving wife. He called me by my name. I looked up from the pile of medical records and looked at them calmly. "I don't think we have anything more to talk about." "No, there is," he sneered. His smile was full of contempt. "You're deliberately trying to fool us. Cut off all our contracts, suspend my authority, and you thought we'd give in. What a mistake." "I don't understand what you're saying." I still maintained my calm expression as I answered. "As the director, I'm just doing what I have to do to protect this hospital, director." This time, Park Ha-yoon stepped forward. Her voice was no longer cheerful. His voice was sharp, filled with envy and jealousy. "Stop showing off, sister-in-law. You're in that position because your father gave you that. What do you know about business? If it weren't for Jin-woo, this hospital would have already gone under. Now you're finally showing your true colors." I laughed. "I guess the play the affectionate sister-in-law and brother-in-law play that was just a friend's prank is over now." "Yes, it's over." Jin-woo slammed the desk hard. "You're acting in front of me. Now, Jin-gil, come in and show me. Ha-yoon and I are truly in love. We were in love before you showed up. You were just a rich fool who interfered in our love." Hearing that shameless confession from his own lips, he already knew it, but hearing it from his own lips, a pang in his heart. "We've put up with you enough," Ha-yoon continued in a defiant voice. "I've put up with living next to an incompetent and boring man like Jin-ho. I deserve to live with a man like Jin-woo. And Jin-woo deserves to live with a woman who truly loves him, not some old woman who only cares about work." They no longer had a shred of shame. They insulted me, their brother, and their husband. "So what do you want?" I asked in an icy voice. "Divorce," Jin-woo firmly stated. "Divorce and division of property. I'm largely responsible for the hospital's size. So you have to give me half. If you take half of the hospital, Ha-yoon and I will move far away. You'll never appear in my life again. This is a very favorable deal for you. If you refuse, then..." My gaze sharpened. Jin-woo smiled cruelly. "Then don't blame us. Think about it. What would happen if rumors spread that the competent hospital director couldn't even take care of his own husband and let him cheat on his sister-in-law? What would happen to the hospital's reputation? I want to become the laughingstock of the entire city. Could patients trust a director whose private life was so turbulent? Your choice." They were threatening me. They were using their own betrayal as a weapon to threaten me. Fearing that I would lose my reputation, fearing that the hospital would be ruined, they believed I would simply comply with their demands. I saw the two men standing before me, their faces filled with triumph. My heart no longer ached, only contempt filled it. "Okay," I said in a strangely calm voice. "Give me time to think. I'll give you an answer in 3 days." They smiled triumphantly at each other and turned away without saying a word. They must have thought I had given in. They didn't know. My agreement wasn't to buy time to think, but to prepare for a final counterattack. And the first person I had to find was the most pitiful victim of this play, Mr. Jin-ho. That night, when Lee Jin-ho and Park Ha-yoon revealed their true colors to me, I decided I had to talk to Mr. Jin-ho. I couldn't let him live in deception any longer. I couldn't allow him to continue being exploited by his trusted wife and brother. He had a right to know the truth, and I needed an inner circle to completely dismantle their false empire. But talking to Jin-ho wasn't easy. He was kind, gentle, and completely obedient to his brother. If I told him the truth, he might not believe me, or even think I was sowing discord between us. I had to approach him very carefully, and above all, I needed undeniable evidence. I arranged to meet Jin-ho at a quiet, secluded cafe near the hospital. I made the excuse that I needed to discuss a problem with the hospital's machinery. Jin-ho arrived immediately, his face as kind and innocent as ever. "Sister-in-law, why did you call me sister-in-law?" He still respectfully called me sister-in-law. Hearing that title filled my heart with regret once again, I didn't say anything indirectly. I placed a copy of the toxicology test results from that night in front of him. Mr. Jin-ho, I'd like you to look at this first. Mr. Jin-ho picked up the paper curiously. He scanned it, his face gradually hardening. Sildana Pale Dame, what is this? Sister-in-law, why did this come out of my wife and brother's blood? He looked up at me with puzzled eyes. Mr. Jin-ho, what do you think this is? I asked in a calm voice. They said it was a prank. Mr. Jin-ho, do you believe that? Can you believe that story? Mr. Jin-ho lowered his head and remained silent. He may be weak, but I knew he wasn't stupid. He must have had his own suspicions. Sister-in-law, you're suspecting my wife and brother right now. Instead of answering, I handed him the tablet PC. On the screen were photos taken by Jisoo's detective team. Photos of Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon holding hands and entering the Afistel. Photos of them being affectionate at a furniture store. Jin-ho trembled as he looked at them. The teacup in his hand fell to the floor and shattered. No, this can't be right. This is Photoshop. Sister-in-law, are you lying to me? He looked at me with pleading eyes, as if begging me to please tell him so. My heart ached. I knew the truth was cruel to him, but I couldn't help but say it. It's not a lie, Jin-ho. I hoped it was a lie too, but it's true. And I pulled out the last piece of evidence. The evidence I could never deny. It was a report on Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon's past, investigated by the detective agency. Read it, Jin-ho. Mr. Jin-ho, how his beloved wife and his respected brother had staged a perfect play to deceive you and me. Jin-ho picked up the document with trembling hands. He read it word by word. His face grew pale, then flushed red, then white again. His once somber eyes, now bloodshot with pain and rage. I could see his knuckles turning white as he gripped the document tightly. When he read the final part, the analysis of the slave operation and how he was merely a pawn on the chessboard, a shield for their sinful love, he couldn't hold it in any longer. He put his head on the desk and buried his face in his hands. His shoulders trembled slightly as he spoke. He didn't cry out loud, but I knew they were tears more painful than 1,000 screams. They were the tears of a man who had been betrayed in the most cruel way by the two people he loved and trusted most in the world. I sat there quietly, giving him time to face his pain. After a long time, Jin-ho slowly raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot, but they no longer looked fragile or weak. Instead, they were filled with a cold gaze and extreme anger. Sister-in-law, what should I do now? It's up to you, Jin-ho, I answered. You can choose to remain silent, ignore me, and continue living in this lie. Or you can stand with me, expose their true colors, and seek justice for yourself. Jin-ho didn't hesitate for an inch. I will help you, sister-in-law. His voice was firm. I will not let those two go. I will make them pay. Gwang-han's awakening was born of pain, but it gave me an invaluable ally, an inner supporter. Someone who knew every nook and cranny of that house. And he didn't let me down. Jin-ho's unwavering resolve that day opened a fierce chapter in my fight. I was no longer alone. Next to my sharp advisor, Jisoo, I gained an unexpected ally from enemy lines. My once weak and pitiful brother-in-law was now a completely different person, under the weight of betrayal. Pain didn't break him. It was replaced by cold rage and a steely resolve to seek justice for himself. And he acted with remarkable cunning and stealth. He didn't make a fuss or question his wife or brother. He returned home and continued to play the role of the naive husband. He treated Ha-yoon as usual and pretended to still trust his capable brother. Thanks to his calm, Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-woo never suspected anything. They thought their innocent pawn was still lying quietly on the chessboard. But they didn't know that another spirit was now possessing that pawn. Every day after work, Jin-ho would secretly meet Jisoo and me in a safe place, and he would provide us with the invaluable information and evidence he had quietly collected. The first and most compelling evidence was the recorded phone calls he had secretly installed on Ha-yoon's phone months ago. It turned out his suspicions as a husband were just hidden by his weakness, always lingering like an ember. He had long suspected his wife. Her frequent overnight stays, her expensive gifts from unknown sources. But he lacked the courage to face them, and he didn't want to believe the truth. Even after installing the recording app, he couldn't bear to listen, until today. Jisoo and I stayed up all night listening to those hundreds of recordings. And you see, they were filled with disgusting evidence. They weren't mere whispers of love or secret dating plans. They were crime diaries recorded in sound. We heard them discussing how to set up shell companies and inflate contract prices. This testing equipment only cost 500 million won. My brother inflated it to 2.5 million won and filed the documents. What would that stupid woman know? Ha-yoon's voice on the phone was filled with pride and contempt. That stupid woman she was talking about was me. We heard them planning their futures overseas. Just hold on a little longer, and if we can embezzle another billion won or so, we'll have enough money to move over there and live. I'll start a company when we get there. You don't have to do anything, and just stay home and take care of me and our children. Lee Jin-woo's voice was filled with hope. And the most terrifying thing was hearing them talk about that fateful night in the emergency room. Still, thank goodness. Kim Seo-hyun believed it was a friend's joke. You're a really good actor. Jin-woo's voice sounded relieved. Of course, if I hadn't cried and made such a fuss, would that woman have believed it? Only Jin-no would have felt bad. His expression was so stupid back then, it was pitiful. Well, there's nothing I can do. If a man is stupid, he deserves it. Ha-yoon's response was cold and cruel. Their every word pierced my heart like a dagger, as did Jin-no, who was sitting next to me, clenching his fists and listening with red bloodshot eyes. It wasn't just the recordings. Jin-no has secretly copied all the data on Ha-yoon's laptop. Inside, we found drafts of ghost contracts that hadn't yet been signed, emails exchanged with ghost suppliers, and even encrypted Excel files detailing the flow of illegal funds siphoned from the hospital. The actual amount of embezzlement was far greater than what the accounting team leader and I had realized. Jin-ho also revealed another secret. Lee Jin-ho had another secret hideout in another luxury lifestyle, where he and Ha-yoon often met and enjoyed their future. That lifestyle had been purchased with the dirty money they had embezzled and was disguised as Ha-yoon's distant relative. It was their headquarters, where they hid their most important documents and evidence. With Jin-ho's arrival, the criminal puzzle of Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon came together perfectly. We had everything in our hands, evidence of an illicit relationship, evidence of a systematic fraud conspiracy, and even evidence of embezzlement worth billions of won. After organizing all the evidence, Jisoo said, "This is enough to not only send them to prison, but to make them rot for a very, very long time. It's time to act." Seo-yeon. That's right, it's time to act. But I didn't just want to hand over all the evidence to the police. I wanted to deal with them, to lay the final blow. I wanted to set a final trap for them to fall into, driven by their own greed and pride. I wanted to make them sign their own death sentences. After Jin-ho became our ally, the criminal picture became perfect. We had lost almost everything. The illicit relationship, the slave operation plan, and even the clear evidence of embezzlement of hospital funds. But Jisoo, ever the cautious lawyer, said we were still missing one thing. The one thing that would seal all their loopholes was a direct confession from the mastermind's mouth. Think about it. Seo-yeon and Jisoo analyzed it. Even if we had all the financial records and ghost contracts, Lee Ji-woo was a cunning fox. If we went to court, he could shift all the blame onto Park Ha-yoon. He'd say she was the head of the inventory management team, that it was all done unilaterally, that he was simply deceived, and that he was only responsible for management. He'd sacrifice Park Ha-yoon to survive. We couldn't give him any room to escape the law. Jisoo was absolutely right. I'd witnessed Lee Jin-woo's cunning and cruelty. He could even sacrifice his own brother, so abandoning his mistress to clear his name would have been nothing. We needed a trap. A very clever final trap to make that cunning fox poke his head in, and a very daring plan, a sweet legal bait too sweet to refuse, was conceived by Jisoo. This plan directly targeted Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon's two greatest weaknesses, their endless greed and their foolish pride. I called Lee Jin-woo directly. I've thought it through. I spoke in a weary, resigned voice, like someone completely defeated and resigned to their fate. I agree to the divorce. A moment of silence fell on the other side of the math room, and then Jin-woo's voice, unable to hide his joy, could be heard. Okay, you're right. Then, as for the property issue, I agreed to give you half of the hospital. I continued. Every word felt like a knife cutting into my heart, but I knew it was a necessary sacrifice. But there's one condition. Condition? What condition? He asked cautiously. I don't want this to be a fuss. I don't want my reputation and the hospital tarnished. I won't go to court. Everything will be resolved through a divorce agreement. We'll even clarify the division of property. For legal effect and confidentiality, all proceedings will be handled at the office of my friend, Choi Ji-soo, attorney at law. How about that? I could hear Jin-woo sighing in relief over the phone. He'd quietly receive half of the property without a legal battle. This was a much better deal than he'd expected. Okay, I agree. He answered immediately, without a moment's hesitation. Let your lawyer decide the time and place. He asked so easily that it was hard to believe. Greed had completely paralyzed his reasoning. He had no doubt why I readily agreed to such a disadvantageous settlement. He assumed I was completely crushed by betrayal and had no will to fight. And then, the most elaborate legal trap was drawn up by Jisoo. It was a nearly 20-page divorce and property division agreement, filled with complex and intricate legal jargon and clauses. On the surface, it was a simple agreement, stipulating that I would transfer my 50% stake in Ansong Hospital to Lee Jin-woo. Jisoo intentionally made this section very clear and attractive, listing detailed figures and property values to capture their full attention. However, our real weapon, our fatal flaw, was cleverly hidden in a block, a section that the greedy and unwary would skip. The block was titled Memorandum on Work Confirmation and Transfer of Legal Responsibility. It sounded very administrative and boring. Inside, it contained one clause that, while written for memory-saving purposes, was extremely fatal. The core provisions of the clause were as follows. Gamnown agrees to transfer a 50% stake to Jin-woo Lee. In return, Party B confirms that, as the Vice President of Management, he has directly overseen the hospital's financial activities for the past 5 years. He assumes full legal and financial responsibility for all medical equipment supply contracts and other financial transactions concluded during his tenure. Party B guarantees that all contracts and transactions have been conducted transparently and lawfully. If any dispute, lawsuit, or investigation arises from a relevant agency in connection with this contract or transaction, Party B assumes sole and final responsibility under the law of good faith and will compensate Party A and the hospital for all damages that may arise. Gentlemen, this clause was effectively a written confession. By signing it, Jin-woo Lee was essentially acknowledging himself as the ultimate and sole person responsible for all financial irregularities at the hospital. He signed, taking full responsibility for all the crimes. This was perfect because it was disguised as a simple clause in a handover procedure to avoid future disputes, as Jisoo would explain. Jisoo had everything perfectly prepared. The signing ceremony was scheduled to take place at her law office in 3 days. Jisoo also contacted the police economics team, informing them of the plan and providing evidence. An on-site arrest operation was planned. That day, not only lawyers but also those who would execute justice would be waiting in hiding at Jisoo's law office. I anxiously awaited the final judgment day. During those 3 days, I left home and temporarily stayed at Jisoo's house. I didn't want to stay there for even a second longer. I also provided Jin-ho with temporary housing. He needed time to face the truth and decide on his future, and finally the day arrived. Jisoo and I arrived at the office early in the morning. Plainclothes police officers also took their positions. They were in a secret room with a one-way mirror that allowed them to observe and hear everything in the conference room. All preparations were complete. All that was left was to wait for the two prey to walk in on their own. At the appointed time, Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon entered Jisoo's office together. They looked furious and determined. They were dressed in elaborate attire, as if they were about to sign a worldly contract. Their faces bore the glee of those about to receive a vast fortune. They looked at me with a look that was both sympathetic and mocking. It was as if they were saying, "See, you lost in the end." They hadn't brought a lawyer with them. Perhaps they felt it was unnecessary to spend legal fees on such a favorable settlement, or perhaps they feared that their dark plot would be exposed if a lawyer were present. Their pride had once again caught up with them. "Welcome, you two," Jisoo ushered them into their seats. Her expression remained professional and cool. "This is the final agreement. Please read all the terms carefully before signing." Jisoo slid the thick contract in front of them. I felt my heart pounding as I sat across from him. Would they notice? Should I read the appendix carefully? Lee Jin-woo picked up the agreement, but only skimmed the first few pages regarding the division of property. His eyes lit up when he saw the number 50% and its estimated value. He didn't read it carefully, focusing solely on those numbers. "Okay, no problem. Where should I sign?" he asked impatiently. Ha-yoon, sitting next to him, smiled triumphantly. She pulled out her cell phone, probably to share the good news with her mother-in-law, who was anxiously waiting at home. "Jin-woo, please take care of it," Jisoo said calmly. "The contract is long. You should read it carefully, especially the final block section regarding the transfer of business and related legal responsibilities. It's to avoid unnecessary disputes later." Jisoo deliberately emphasized the word block. It was a final test of their prudence, but Lee Jin-woo couldn't stand it any longer. Greed had completely paralyzed his reasoning. "Oh, what kind of administrative procedures do you read? I completely trust Attorney Choi's expertise. Please tell me where to sign, quickly, we're busy." The busy thing he was talking about was probably a victory party. I looked at Jisoo and she nodded discreetly, so as not to catch me. Everything was going according to plan. Good. With that trust, Jisoo opened the last page. "You can sign here. Here and here too. You need to sign every page. Ha-yoon, please sign here in the testimony section. And everyone, the moment I've been waiting for has finally arrived." Lee Jin-woo grabbed a pen and without a moment's hesitation scrawled his name on each page of the agreement. He signed with confidence and pride. He signed the last page, even the crucial block, without even reading the contents. Ha-yoon was no different. She happily signed her name in the witness box, as if she were signing the success certificate of the conspiracy they had painstakingly built. They had personally signed their own death sentences. A confession on paper was more powerful and undeniable evidence than any oral confession. The play was truly over. A giant fish had finally been caught in the net. After signing, Jin-woo pushed the agreement toward Jisoo and breathed a sigh of relief. "It's over. As of today, Kim Seo-yoon and I are no longer related. I hope Attorney Choi and Kim Seo-yoon, who own 50% of the shares, will quickly complete the transfer process." He stood up, linked arms with Ha-yoon, and prepared to leave. His face was beaming with happiness. But Jisoo spoke. Her voice was no longer professionally cool. There was a hint of mockery. "Wait a minute, Mr. Lee Jin-woo. You should stay a little longer. A very special guest. Some people want to congratulate you. Who are you, a guest?" Jin-woo frowned, his face slightly irritated. Just then, the conference room door swung open. But the people who entered weren't office workers. 5 police officers, wearing uniforms and solemn expressions, stood behind them, Jin-woo's betrayed younger brother. Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon's faces turned pale and the smiles on their faces froze. They looked at the officers, then at me and Jisoo, then back and forth between bewilderment and fear. "What are you doing?" Jin-woo stammered. Jisoo didn't answer. She picked up the agreement they just signed and held it high. "Mr. Lee Jin-woo and Mr. Park Hae-yoon, you are under arrest. And this is the confession you just signed." Jisoo's words and the sudden appearance of the police officers struck Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon like a bolt from the blue. They were completely frozen. The victorious smile that had lingered on his lips froze, replaced by an unmistakable fear. They looked at the uniformed men approaching, then at the agreement in Jisoo's hand, and then back at me. Their eyes were filled with confusion and disbelief. "Chi arrest? What do you mean?" Lee Jin-woo was the first to come to his senses. He tried to regain his composure, but his voice was already trembling. "We didn't do anything. This is a mistake. We were just going through a normal civil divorce process." Park Hae-yoon was also speechless, her face pale and devoid of blood. "That's right. Police officers, there's a misunderstanding. That woman, Kim Seo-hyun, set a trap for us. She pointed at me and tried to play the victim, but their clumsy theatrics were now worthless." A solemn-faced investigator stepped forward. He silently placed a small, empty projector on the desk. The projector's light illuminated the white wall opposite, and the evidence of their crimes began to be revealed, one by one, in a clear and undeniable manner. The first piece of evidence was the toxicology test results from that fateful night in the emergency room. The two red circles, sildenafil and zolpidem, were clearly visible in black letters on the wet white paper. "Mr. Lee Jin-ho, Miss Park Hae-yoon," the investigator's voice was firm and cold. "Can you explain why both stimulants and strictly controlled psychotropic sleeping pills were detected in your blood? Friends, a prank?" "According to our investigation, neither the party you attended that night nor the friend who played the prank existed." Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon were speechless. The investigator continued without giving them a moment to recover. "Second, about your relationship." The screen changed to photos taken by Jisoo's detective team from their hometown. They were old photos of them as a loving couple in their teens. Testimony from neighbors and old classmates was also presented. The two were originally first loves. But why did Park Hae-yoon marry her lover's younger brother? And why did the two continue to meet secretly, even after they each had families of their own? Can this be considered a normal sister-in-law-brother relationship? Jin-ho, standing in a corner of the room with the police, was contorted in pain as he once again faced the brutal truth about his wife and brother. And finally, the third and decisive blow was delivered. And most importantly, about the financial activities the two had abandoned at Ansong Hospital. A plethora of documents flashed on the screen. A detailed diagram of shell companies with non-existent names and addresses was drawn. Contracts for supplying goods with prices inflated 5 or 10-fold, and even a flowchart of billions of won flowing from hospital accounts to those shell companies, and then into Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon as personal accounts all fueled the investigators' harsher tone. Using a branch office for business purposes to embezzle property constitutes a clear crime under the Aggravated Punishment, etc., of Specific Economic Crimes Act. In cases where the embezzlement amount is particularly large, a maximum sentence of life imprisonment can be imposed. At that moment, Park Hae-yoon could no longer endure it. She collapsed to the floor and began to cry out in frenzy. "No, I didn't. Jin-woo ordered it all. I just did what I was told. I'm not guilty." The Viper, cornered, lit his colleague without hesitation. Lee Jin-woo stared at the howling Naeonyo on the floor with a mixture of contempt and anger, but he too had no other way out. He staggered into a chair, covering his face with his hands, but the trial wasn't over yet. The investigator picked up the divorce agreement they had just signed and held it aloft. And finally, the confessions of the two. In Article 2, Section 3, Paragraph 1 of this agreement, Mr. Lee Jin-woo personally confirmed by signature that he would take full legal and financial responsibility for all supply contracts concluded during his tenure. He has essentially admitted all his guilt. There's no need for us to investigate further. Thank you for your honest confession. The investigator's seemingly indebted words were like a final hammer blow to Lee Jin-woo's head. He jumped up, snatched the agreement, and hurriedly read the block. Then, his face transformed from shock to utter rage. He realized he had signed the death sentence of his career and future with his own hand, using Jisoo's elaborate legal trap. He, like a mad beast, lunged at me, screaming, "I'll kill you." But before he could even touch me, he was subdued by the police and fell to the ground. After Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon were arrested, "You have the right to remain silent and have the right to an attorney." 2 pairs of cold handcuffs were placed on their wrists. The devil and the monster were finally caught in the law's net. I watched them being dragged away. There was no relief. Only emptiness and regret remained for a marriage that began with lies and ended in handcuffs. The net of heaven unfolded and completely enveloped them. No matter how elaborately disguised the crime, it will eventually be exposed. I saw clearly that justice, however delayed, will surely come. The arrest of Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon, the vice president and head of the materials management team at Ansong Hospital, at their law firm caused a huge stir. The details of their slave operation, which embezzled billions of won in hospital funds, were exposed to the law and the media. This incident became a major economic crime, a costly lesson in how people with knowledge and status can become corrupt. At trial a few months later, faced with undeniable evidence toxicology results, financial transaction records, witness testimony, and especially the divorce agreement they personally signed, Lee Jin-woo and Park Hae-yoon had no more escape hatches. They shifted blame to each other in court, exposing each other's crimes and marking the final act of a tragic comedy. Ultimately, the court handed down a harsh sentence. The mastermind, Lee Jin-woo, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for embezzlement, and Park Hae-yoon, his active accomplice, to 15 years. It was a fitting end for their betrayal and boundless greed. And their family, the one I once considered a gospel, was completely shattered. My mother-in-law, unable to overcome the shock of discovering the true nature of her 2 beloved children, collapsed. She suffered a stroke, spending the rest of her life bedridden with regret and self-blame. And the most significant victim of this story was my brother-in-law, Jin-no. After all the truth came to light, he completely broke down. He came to see me. It wasn't to apologize, but to express gratitude. He thanked me for telling him the truth, no matter how cruel it might be. He said he couldn't face me anymore, and he couldn't face staying in this city. After filing for divorce from Hae-yoon, he quietly resigned from the hospital and decided to return to his hometown to start a new life. Watching his lonely back, my heart ached. He, like me, was a victim of the same drama. We had been deceived and betrayed by the people we loved most. After the trial, I resolutely filed for divorce from Lee Jin-woo. All proceedings were swift, and I completely severed all ties with him and his family. The days that followed were extremely difficult for both me and Ansong Hospital. This unfortunate incident received massive media criticism and severely damaged the hospital's reputation, which my father had spent his entire life building. Patients decreased, and the staff became distraught. At one point, I even thought we would never recover. But I didn't break down. For my father, for his efforts, and for the hundreds of medical professionals and staff working here, I couldn't allow myself to crumble. Together with Jisoo and the loyal colleagues who remained by my side, I set out to rebuild the hospital. We held a press conference, revealed everything transparently, and offered a sincere apology to everyone. We completely reorganized the management and strengthened all financial procedures. I worked day and night to regain the trust of our patients and the community. And then something amazing happened. Jin-ho returned. He wasn't alone. He brought back a group of skilled technicians from his hometown. He said to me, "Sister-in-law, I can't run away forever. I owe you and this hospital an indelible debt. Please give me a chance. A chance to atone, even if only a little, for the wrongs my family has committed through my labor. Seeing his determined and sincere gaze, I agreed. He became my steadfast companion and right-hand man as we rebuilt the hospital. Having suffered the same pain, we found a kinship and a sense of resolve in each other. Working together, we rebuilt Ansang Hospital from the rubble. This is the end of my story. A story that begins with betrayal and ends with rebirth. I lost my husband and family, but I found myself again. I realized that a woman's worth does not depend on having the perfect man by her side. It lies in independence, reason, and the courage to face the truth and fight for what's right. Now, every day, when I walk the hallways of Ansang Hospital in a white coat, seeing the smiles of the patients and the dedication of the medical staff, I feel true happiness and peace. The new dawn, greeted by my once shattered and perhaps Mr. Jino's two broken hearts, has just begun. My journey, so bitter and resentful, yet so intense, has finally reached its final chapter. Now, as I walk the hallways of Ansang Hospital in my white coat, where I once suffered a terrible betrayal, there is no longer any hatred or pain left in my heart. Instead, like the sea after a storm, a strangely calm and tranquility has settled upon me. The fragments of the shipwreck called marriage still remain, but above them lies the clearing sky and the dazzling light of dawn. Reflecting on the path I've taken, I keep asking myself, why could I have been so ingeniously and cruelly deceived? Why, with my education and social standing, did I blindly believe in a fake love for 5 years? And I found the answer. Like many other women, I yearned for the perfect ideal. I was blinded by the facade Lee Jin-woo had painstakingly crafted as the nation's husband, the perfect man. The first and most painful lesson I learned was to always be wary of unrealistic perfection. True love and true marriage aren't fairy tales. They're not stories where the prince always smiles and the princess has no worries. Life is inherently imperfect, and so are people. True love has conflicts, arguments, and flaws that both parties accept and overcome. However, the hidden machinations of false love often hide a flawless facade of perfection. Looking back, what was Lee Ji-woo like? He gave up his career for me. It was such a huge and profound sacrifice. He supported every decision I made without a single complaint. It was such perfect understanding. He always whispered sweet nothings and acted romantically. He was so attentive. None of this was love. It was a script. It was written to conquer me, to lull me to sleep, and to gain my absolute trust. Perfection without a single flaw is sometimes the biggest flaw and the most suspicious sign. So women, don't be too quick to be captivated by a man who is too perfect. Look deeper. Look at him when he's in trouble, when he's angry, when he reveals his most ordinary flaws. Because a man's true character is revealed not when he tries to appear perfect, but when he's most vulnerable. The second lesson is an even more important one about trust and independence. I made the mistake that many successful women make, thinking that because I was competent in my area of expertise, I could completely trust my spouse with other areas. I fatally confused trust with delegation. Trust is about believing in the other person's character and love, while also sharing responsibilities, supervising, and checking each other's work. Delegation, however, is about handing over my life, my business, and all my assets to the other person without trying to know or control them. As the director of a hospital, I had no control over my hospital's finances. I trusted the label of family too much and entrusted the entire management and inventory management to Lee Jin-woo and Park Ha-yoon without any checks and balances. It was precisely this very mandate that created the harsh soil, the huge hole where their greed could sprout and grow, becoming the tree of a great crime. So, I implore you, my female comrades, no matter how successful or busy you are, never give up control of your own life. Be independent not only financially, but also in your thinking and management skills. Learn to read financial statements and study contracts. In your marriage, be a true partner, not just a queen sitting on a high throne. That independence and determination are the strongest armor that will protect you from the glare from behind. And my story is also a lesson in the power of reason in the face of crisis. When I witnessed the betrayal that fateful night in the emergency room, my heart was shattered. The pain, the anger, the disgust. All of those emotions nearly consumed me. If I had acted emotionally then, screaming, crying, venting, and blaming, I would have fallen into their trap. They would have turned me into an uncontrollable woman blinded by jealousy, and if that had happened, I would have lost all my strength. But in that moment, my rationality as a doctor won out. Instead of screaming, I ordered a thorough toxicology test. That very cool composure saved me. It gave me undeniable legal evidence and became the first shot in every subsequent counterattack. What is the lesson here? When a storm rages, when faced with life's greatest shock, it's okay to hurt and cry, but you must not let your emotions overwhelm your reason. You must take a deep breath, step back, and think logically. What should I do now? What are my next steps? How can I best protect myself and those I love? Emotions are like fire, they can warm us, but they can also burn us. But reason is like a stream that extinguishes that destructive flame and guides us down a wiser path. Finally, I'd like to talk about forgiveness and rebirth. After all this, many people ask me if I can believe in love. My answer is yes. I no longer hate Lee Jin-woo. I only feel sorry for people who destroy themselves because of greed. But the lessons he taught me will never be forgotten. I believe that good men and true love still exist somewhere in the world. But before we can find them, we must first learn to love and protect ourselves. I decided not to seek out someone to lean on. Instead, I found new joy and meaning in my work, in dedicating myself to saving lives. And in a completely unexpected way, I found a companion and a friend who shared my heart. That person was Jin-no. Two people who had suffered the same pain. Two broken hearts found in each other not a lover's love, but deep empathy and understanding. We leaned on each other and rose together from the ashes. He helped me with technical tasks at the hospital, and I helped him regain his confidence and joy in life. Together, we rebuilt Ansang Hospital not just as a hospital, but as a home that heals both body and soul. Our relationship proved one thing. What remains after betrayal is not only pain, but sometimes friendship and camaraderie, more precious than love. And Jin-ho's dawn, the new dawn that greased two hearts that were once shattered, has truly begun. A dawn without lies or fear, a dawn filled only with hard work, dedication, and a firm belief in the values of goodness and justice. This is the end of my story. A story that begins with betrayal and ends with rebirth. Thank you to everyone who has listened to my story, sympathized with it, and shared it with me. While my story was sad, I hope it can offer a small awakening and motivation to someone struggling with lost direction in life. Always stay awake, always be strong, and never stop believing in yourself. If this story was meaningful to you, if it touched your heart even a little, please don't hesitate to like it and share it with the women you love. And above all, please subscribe to the Leisurely Aging channel. Your support is our greatest driving force, enabling us to tell more truthful and valuable life stories. See you in the next story.